The Aeneid, Chapter 1. Venting her hatred of the Trojans upon Aeneas and his group of Trojan refugees, Juno forces them to travel stormy seas on their way to Italy. Finally, they land near the city of Carthage, on the coast of North Africa, and meet Dido, its great queen. I sing of arms and the man, Aeneas, who, after many years of wandering, came to Italy and the shores of Lavinium. Fate forced him to leave his homeland of Troy when the Greeks sacked Priam's great city. Then cruel Juno, with unrelenting hatred for all Trojans, forced him to endure stormy seas and war in Italy before he could build a city there and bring his gods into Latium, thus establishing the Latin race, the lords of Alba Longa and the high-walled Rome. Goddess, tell me why the Queen of Olympus forced such a good man to endure so much suffering and danger. Was it not enough that the Trojans were defeated by the Greeks and pitiless Achilles? Yet Juno has kept them wandering for 7 years, driven over all the seas and always far from Latium. Why does one of the immortal gods harbor so fierce an anger? Above all other lands, Juno loved the ancient city of Carthage. The city had been founded by its queen Dido and other settlers from Tyre and Phoenicia, and was famed for its wealth and its skill in war. However, Juno knew that someday an aggressive people of Trojan descent, who ruled many other lands, was fated to conquer her fair city. Moreover, the Queen of Olympus had not forgotten Paris's judgment against her beauty, and even the Trojans' defeat at the hands of the Greeks had not satisfied her hatred. Why should I allow their fate to prevent me from punishing the Trojans before they reach Italy, Juno thought. If Minerva can sink Greek ships and drown their sailors because of the arrogance of one Greek leader, surely I, the queen of the gods and the sister and wife of Jupiter, should be able to subdue this people. With such thoughts enraging her heart, Juno came to Iolia, homeland of the storm clouds, where King Aeolus confines and soothes the struggling winds and the roaring gales deep in a dreary cave. Aeolus, she greeted him, a people whom I hate are sailing the Phoenician seas, bringing Troy's household gods into Italy. I want you to arouse your mighty winds and unhurl them furiously upon these Trojans, sinking their ships and strewing their bodies upon the waves of the sea. I shall do as you wish, replied Aeolus, for you and Jupiter have made me lord of clouds and storms. He struck the side of the cave with his spear, commanding the ships to emerge and attack the Trojan ships with mighty waves and great gales. As the Trojans watched, clouds suddenly turned day into night. The men cried out with dread as flashes of lightning illuminated the clouds, and the rumbling of thunder surrounded them. Aeneas stretched his arms toward the heavens and cried, "Compared to us, 3 and 4 times blessed are those who are fated to die before their father's eyes upon the plain of Troy." His words were followed by a shrieking gust of wind that struck his sail full force and raised mountainous waves, causing the oars to snap and the ship to turn broadside into the waves. As water cascaded into the ship, the sailors were washed overboard. Some were carried high upon the crests, while others could glimpse the ground between the swells. The storm drove 3 ships upon concealed rocks. 3 others were forced upon a shallow sandbar. One was completely swallowed by a swirling whirlpool of waters. The sea now wore the planking of ships and the bodies of men intermingled with its collection of weapons of war and Trojan treasure. When Neptune became aware of this wild turbulence, he raised his head above the waves in order to learn more about the storm. He immediately recognized his sister Juno's anger behind the destruction of Aeneas's fleet, so he summoned the east wind and the west wind and said, "How dare you raise such a tempest without my command? Return quickly to your king and remind him that I, not he, am lord of the sea." Neptune calmed the sea and sent the clouds away, letting the sun shine forth once more. As when argument and strife tear apart a great country, and the common folk rage at one another until suddenly they see a man honored for his good character and worthy service, and they became silent and listened attentively while he soothes their passion with his words, so the sea sank into silent submission as the lord of the sea drove his chariot over the waters. Aeneas and his remaining companions, weary from battling at the sea, headed for the coast of Libya, which was the closest shore. Upon finding a good harbor, the 7 remaining ships pulled into the sheltered waters. The Trojans disembarked, glad to feel firm ground beneath their feet. Aeneas and his companion, Aeneas, set off to see what they could learn about their missing ships. From the edge of a nearby cliff they had a good view of the sea, but they could see no sign of the ships. They did see 3 huge stags, each leading a herd of deer, grazing along the shore. Aeneas took his bow from Aeneas and shot 3 leading stags and 4 other large deer, providing 1 deer for each of the ships. Then the 2 men descended the cliff, picked up the deer, and carried them back to the ships, where Aeneas divided them among his company. As Jupiter looked down upon them, Venus approached her, her eyes brimming with tears. "O ruler of gods, what terrible crimes have Aeneas and the Trojans committed that they cannot reach Italy? You promised that their lineage would be born the Romans, a people who would rule both land and sea. Is that how you reward my son's virtue?" The father of gods immortal smiled and replied, "Have no fear, daughter. I have not changed my mind, nor has the fate of your Trojans changed. You will see the city of Lavinium and the fame of the great-souled Aeneas. Then his son, Aeneas, will move the capital of Alba Longa, where for 300 years Hector's race will rule Italy. Finally, the priestess Ilia will bear twins to Mars, and one of them, Romulus, will find Rome. The Romans will rule with no divine limit upon either the extent of their lands or the duration of their power. The day will come when the Roman descendants of the Trojans will conquer Phthia, the city of Peleus and Achilles, Argos, and Agamemnon's famous Mycenae. Augustus Caesar will be born from this noble line of Trojans," Jupiter continued. "Only the oceans will limit his empire, and the stars alone will limit his glory. This renowned Caesar will close the temple of Janus, imprisoning within it savage rage. Sitting on his death-dealing weapons, with his hands tied in 100 bronze knots, this fury, powerless, will shriek with ghastly blood-stained lips. Then wars will cease, and an age of law will reign on earth. In spite of her present anger, Juno, too, will cherish the Roman people, who will rule the world. Fate has willed it so." With these words, Jupiter sent his messenger, Mercury, down to Carthage, so that Dido, ignorant of her fate, would welcome the Trojans. Because it was the will of Jupiter, the people of Carthage put aside their warlike thoughts, and their mighty queen became compassionate toward the Trojans. With the light of the morning, Aeneas concealed his ships within the shelter of a hollow rock, and, with Aeneas, set forth to explore the strange country. Soon he saw his mother, Venus, disguised as a young huntress, come across his path. "Tell me, young men," she began, "have you seen my sister hunting in this area?" "I have neither heard nor seen your sister," Aeneas replied. "But who are you? You look and sound like a goddess. Please tell us, if you will, where we are. We were driven here by a storm at sea and have no idea who lives here." "A people native to Tyre live here in the city they are building, called Carthage," Venus explained. "The powerful kingdom of Libya surrounds them. Dido, their queen, founded the city when she fled from her brother after he killed her husband. But who are you? Where are you from? And where are you going?" "I am from ancient Troy, goddess, if that name means anything to you," Aeneas replied. "I am Aeneas the Good, and my fame is known on Mount Olympus. I am carrying with me my household gods that I saved from enemy hands, and I am heading for Troy, for Italy, my new country. Of the 20 ships I started with, only 7 remain, and these have been heavily damaged by wind and waves." "Whoever you are," Venus said, "the immortal gods must favor you, or you would not have survived to reach the city. Just follow the path and go to the queen's palace. Unless my parents only pretended to teach me the art of prophecy, you will find that the winds have driven your mission ships and the men who sailed upon them safely into Carthage." Venus concealed Aeneas and Aeneas in a thick fog so that they could enter the city without being seen or questioned. Their path took them to the top of the hill, from which they could survey the city below. Aeneas marveled at the impressive buildings and the paved roads. Everywhere workers were busy with more construction. As bees in early summer go about their tasks of making honey, some busy in the sunshine gathering nectar from fields of flowers and others storing the liquid in cells bursting with sweet honey, so were the people of Tyre were hard at work building their new city. Concealed in the fog, Aeneas and Aeneas entered the majestic temple dedicated to Juno. As soon as Queen Dido arrived and seated herself, their lost shipmates came forward to speak with her. "O Queen, whom Jupiter has permitted to found this new city," their spokesman began, "we unhappy Trojans ask you to spare our ships and our lives. We have not come to attack you or to rob your homes. We have been driven by storms from sea to sea, and have lost our king, Aeneas, greatest of all men in virtue and in deeds of war. Allow us to beach our storm-shattered ships, while we fashion new planks and oars. If we find our king and our comrades, we shall sail to Italy and Latium. If not, we shall return the way we came to those among our people who have settled near the Straits of Sicily." Dido replied, "Put all fear from your hearts, Trojans. We are aware of Aeneas's people, of Troy's brave soldiers, and their deeds in the war against the Greeks. If you wish to return to Sicily, I shall send you forth with an escort for your safety, and with wealth to sustain you. If you prefer, you may remain in my city. I shall not distinguish between Tyrian and Trojan. Meanwhile, beach your ships while I send scouts along the coast and through Libya. Aeneas may have been shipwrecked along the way." The mist suddenly disappeared, revealing Aeneas and godlike Aeneas, whom Venus made radiant. "Here I stand before you," Aeneas said, "Aeneas of Troy, snatched from the Libyan waves. Neither words nor deeds can thank you, Dido, for offering to share your home and your city with us. If the immortal gods respect virtue and justice, may they reward you." "What fate drives you through such dangers, Aeneas?" Dido asked as she led him inside the palace. "Unhappy fortune has driven me also through evil times, but at last I have found peace in this land." While Dido sent a feast down to Aeneas's comrades in the harbor, Aeneas asked Aeneas to bring his small son, Aeneas, to the palace, along with gifts snatched from the flames of Troy. At the same time, Venus decided it would help protect Aeneas against Juno's schemes if Dido were passionately in love with him. So the goddess called her son Cupid to her side and said, "For just this one night, pretend to be Aeneas, and when Dido hugs you at the feast, breathe into her the hidden fire and poison of passion." Everything went according to Venus's plan. As Dido listened to Aeneas and embraced Cupid, thinking him to be Aeneas's young son, her love for her dead husband faded, and a living passion for Aeneas invaded her sleeping heart. To prolong the evening, Dido continued to question Aeneas about Priam, Hector, and Achilles. Finally, she said, "Tell us, from the beginning, about the strategies the Greeks devised to capture Troy, about the suffering of your people, and about your wanderings over land and sea for these 7 long summers." Chapter 2. Aeneas tells Dido about the Trojan horse and the destruction of Troy. The Tyrians sat in hushed silence, all eyes directed upon Aeneas as he began to speak. "Words cannot express, O Queen, the grief you are asking me to remember. How the Greeks overthrew Troy's great and wealthy kingdom, and the sickening sights I saw. Even a warrior like Achilles or stern Ulysses could not refrain from tears as he told such a tale. However, if you wish to hear about Troy's destruction, I shall tell you, though my mind shudders to remember the events and recoils in pain from the details. Being unable to conquer Troy through the skills of war in 9 years of fighting, the Greek leaders decided to follow Minerva's instruction and build a horse of mountainous bulk from the wood of a fir tree. They pretend that it is a religious offering and let such a rumor spread throughout Troy. Meanwhile, deep inside the horse's cavernous belly, the devious Greeks secretly hide a group of armed warriors, chosen for their courage and skill. We think that the Greek forces are sailing back to Mycenae, but, in fact, their ships are hidden upon the barren shore of Tenedos, an island near Troy. So we rejoice to be free of war at last. The Scaean gates are open to all, and the people venture forth to see where Achilles camped, where the Greek ships were beached, and where the battles were fought. Many stare in wonder at Minerva's deadly gift. Some among us are certain that we should drag the horse within our walls, but others, who are wiser in counsel, advise us to hurl this strange Greek gift into the sea, or to heap flames beneath it to feed upon it, or, at least, to explore its hollow belly by piercing its wooden sides with our spears. Noisily, the crowd argues this way or that. Then the priest of Neptune, Laocoon, comes running down from his fortress, calling to us from afar. "Oh, wretched citizens, you must have lost your senses. Do you believe the Greeks have sailed homeward? Do you imagine that any Greek gifts are without guile? Do you not know, Ulysses? Either Greek warriors are hiding within the wooden body of this beast, or this is a war device that can look beyond our walls and into our homes. Some evil surely lurks within its belly, or will descend upon our city from above. Do not trust the horse, Trojans. No matter how it appears, I fear the Greeks, even when they bear gifts." With these words, the priest hurls his great spear with mighty force into the cavernous side of the horse. As the spear quivers in the wooden belly, the cavernous interior emits a hollow, groaning sound. If the gods had supported us, and our judgment had been sound, Laocoon would have convinced us to destroy the Greek sanctuary with our bronze weapons. Then Priam's great city would still be standing. However, the priest's counsel falls upon deaf ears. Meanwhile, the shouts of some Trojan shepherds draw our attention toward a young man they are dragging before Priam. With his hands tied behind his back, the prisoner is so obviously at our mercy that we do not question his honesty. It does not occur to us that he has courageously chosen to place himself where we would discover him, and that he is prepared to deceive us with his lies or to die as our prisoner. Our youth immediately approach him from all sides and taunt him, but as soon as he speaks, he will teach all of you how treacherous the Greeks are. The prisoner stands among us, unarmed and afraid. "Alas," he cries, "what land or sea will take me? What fate will next befall me? The Greeks have cast me away, and the Trojans angrily clamor for my death." With these words, he arouses our sympathy. "Tell us who you are, and where you are from," we reply, "and why you are here." When he is no longer afraid, he says, "I shall tell you the truth, O king, come what may. I, the most unfortunate of man, am called Sinon, and I am of Greek birth. But I do not want to tell you a tale that does not interest you. If you hate all Greeks just because of their birth, then kill me now. Ulysses would be pleased, and Agamemnon would pay you to do it." Then, of course, we cannot wait to hear his story. Trembling, the prisoner begins his tale, speaking with guile and with false feeling. "Often the Greeks wished to retreat, being weary of the tiresome war and longing for home. How I wish that they had done so. Many times a severe tempest at sea frightened them and kept them on Trojan soil. Then, when the wooden framework of this horse had already been built, storm clouds rumbled throughout the sky. The soldiers could not interpret the omen, so they asked the oracle of Apollo. The god responded, 'In order to reach the shores of Troy, O Greeks, you had to appease the winds with the blood of a maiden's sacrifice. Now, in order to return to your homeland, you will have to please the winds with the blood of a warrior's sacrifice.' When the Greeks heard these words, their hearts froze and a cold shudder ran through them. Whom was Apollo choosing? Ulysses dragged the prophet Calchas forward and told him to discover Apollo's will. Calchas sat speechless in his tent for 10 days, refusing to proclaim a warrior's death. Finally, the demands of the Greeks overcame his reluctance, and he announced my doom. Of course, no one objected, for each was relieved that my fate was not his own. When the day I dreaded arrived, I ran from death. I broke my bonds and hid for the night in a marsh. I hoped that the Greeks would sail away without discovering me, and they did. Now I can never hope to see my homeland, my loving children, or my dear father. I am sorry that the Greeks may make my family atone for my crime by demanding the life of one of them in my place. But I ask you, by the gods above, to pity me, for I do not deserve such suffering." We cannot resist the prisoner's plea. We not only pity him, we grant him life. Priam commands that his bonds be removed and then addresses him with kind words. "Forget that the Greeks were your people," the king tells him. "From this time forth, you are one of us. Now explain to me truthfully, why have the Greeks constructed this monstrous horse? Who designed it, and why? Is it a weapon of war? An offering to one of the gods?" The young man raises his arms to the heavens and replies, "May I be free to put aside my loyalty to the Greeks and hate them for the suffering they have caused me. I am no longer bound by the laws of any country, so surely I can reveal their secret purpose. Only keep your promise, Trojans, and save me in return for the help I am giving you." From the beginning of the war, the Greeks could count on Minerva to help them. But this year, the Greeks captured your prophet and forced him to tell them how they could win. The clever Trojan told them that they first would have to remove from Troy the statue of Minerva. So Ulysses, the contriver of crime, and the ungodly Diomedes secretly enlisted to the help of Helen and stole the statue from its shrine, defiling it with their bloody hands. From that time on, Minerva ceased to favor the Greeks, and their strength was broken. As soon as they placed the statue in their camp, its eyes flashed with flames, salty sweat ran down its body, and 3 times the goddess herself leaped from the ground with her shield and quivering spear. Their prophet then told them that they would not be able to take Troy unless they first returned to Argos and found new favorable omens there. So the Greeks are sailing for Mycenae, but they will return. Meanwhile, the Greeks have followed Calchas's counsel and left this huge wooden horse here in order to atone for their insult to Minerva. The prophet commanded them to build it so large that you Trojans could not bring it through your gates and have it protect you. For if you move the horse into your great city, then you are fated to take the war across the sea to the cities of Greeks and destroy them. On the other hand, if you harm this gift to Minerva, then Priam's country is doomed to utter destruction. So well does Sinon tell this tale that we believe him. His guile and tears conquer us when 10 years of Achilles could not. Then we see the most dreadful omen. Laocoon is sacrificing a mighty bull upon the altar of Neptune when, over the peaceful sea from Tenedos, a shudder to remember, we see 2 snakes with countless coils glide through the waters side by side and head for our shore. Their heads rise high above the wave, and the rest skims along the surface of the water behind them in endless coils, causing the sea to foam and roar. Their eyes blaze forth with blood and fire, and quivering tongues dart from their hissing mouths. We watch them as they cross the land and head directly for Laocoon. Then, terrified, we run from the sight. Upon reaching the altar, the 2 snakes coil themselves around the bodies of Laocoon's 2 young sons, enfolding them in a deadly embrace and sinking their fangs into the children's soft flesh. Then, as their father raises his weapons against them, the serpents entwine themselves around him, twice winding themselves around his waist, twice encircling their scaly bodies around his throat, and raising their heads high above his own. Laocoon is covered with their poisonous black venom and gore. He strains his hands to tear their deadly coils from him, and he screams to heaven as a wounded bull bellows as it shrugs off a poorly aimed axe and runs from the altar. But he is helpless. With the death of the priest, the serpents glide away to Minerva's shrine, where they take refuge under the goddess's feet and the curve of her shield. This omen horrifies us. Laocoon has been punished for his crime, some say. He hurled his spear into the sacred body of the horse and angered Minerva. Pull the horse within the walls of Minerva's shrine, everyone cries. We must atone for our priest's deed. So we make an opening in our walls, clearing the way into the city. Everyone takes part in the work. We place sliding rollers under the horse's feet, tie ropes around its neck, and pull the monster up our walls. As it moves forward, boys and maidens sing hymns and happily handle the rope halter. So the horse glides dangerously into the very city of Priam's great city. Troy, famous in war. 4 times the horse halts near the gates to the city, and 4 times armor sounds within its cavernous belly. Yet, with ears that do not hear, and eyes blinded by fright, we push it ever forward until the ill-omened monster finally rests within our city walls. Even when Priam's daughter Cassandra reveals to us our coming doom, we do not believe her, for Apollo's angry gift to her was to be able to predict the future, but not be believed. And at the close of day, never aware that it was our last, we joyously decorate the shrines of the gods with colorful wreaths and begin an evening of celebration. In time, night rises from the sea, wrapping its mighty robe earth and sky and the scheming Greeks. While we sleep in comfort, unaware of our fate, the Greek ships leave the island of Tenedos and return to the familiar shores of Troy. Then, when Agamemnon's royal ship sends forth a flaming signal, Sinon quietly approaches the monstrous horse and opens its secret hatch. Joyfully, the Greek leaders, one by one, leave the monster's belly and slide down the lowered cable into the night air. Dreadful Ulysses, Menelaus, Neoptolemus, who is the son of Achilles, and Epeus, who designed this devious device, are among them. They kill our guards, open the gates to our city, and welcome back their thousands of companions. Then they attack while we sleep. Chapter 3. Aeneas continues his story, describing to Dido the destruction of Troy. While I am asleep, the figure of Hector, weeping, appears before my eyes. His hair is coated with blood, his body is black with gory dust, and his swollen feet are still punctured with the thongs Achilles used to drag his body around the walls of our city. "Run, goddess-born," he cries to me. "Save yourself from the flames. The Greeks hold our walls, and Troy is burning to the ground. You have done all you can for Priam and his country. If strength could have saved Troy, the Greeks would never have breached our walls. Troy now gives to you her holy things and her household gods. Take them with you as you search for the place you will establish a city." With these words, he brings forth the cloth bands, the eternal fire, and the great goddess Vesta from their inner shrine. As I force myself to awaken, I fear that I recognize the sounds of war in the distance. Screams, cries, the clash of armor on every side. I climb up to the roof of my father's house and strain my ears to learn more, for the land and trees stand between our house and the rest of Troy. As a lone shepherd high upon a rocky peak hears the far roar of a swollen mountain stream as it buries the crops and hurls down the forest, so I become aware of Troy's destruction. Now I understand the meaning of Sinon and the monstrous wooden horse. The Greeks' treacherous scheme has succeeded. I rush inside and grab my weapons. I know that I shall not have time to use them, but my heart blazes with rage and resentment. I long to gather a group of my comrades and fight the Greeks to the death, but that is the most honorable way to die. At my door, I find Panthus, priest of Apollo and father of Hector's friend, the wise Polydamas. He holds his grandchild with one hand and carries the sacred articles and the household gods in the other. "Troy's last hour is upon us," he cries. "Troy is dead, the Trojan people are dead, and our great glory is dead. Jupiter has given everything to the Greeks, who now are lords in our burning city. Armed warriors issue forth from the monstrous horse, and Sinon, arrogant with victory, spreads flames wherever he goes. Thousands of Greek warriors are everywhere among us, guarding our wide open gates and barring passage on our narrow streets." I take the sacred objects from him and prepare to do my part for my country. I go out to the moonlit streets, and my companions gather round me. When I see that they too are eager for battle, I tell them, "Men, if your hearts lead you to be courageous in this hopeless cause, follow me. The fate of our people is clear. The gods who supported our kingdom have left us, and our city is in flames. Let us die fighting." Who can describe to you the chaos of that night? Who can describe its bloodshed? Whose tears can equal our troubles? Like ravenous wolves in a black fog, whose hunger drives them blindly forth, and whose cubs wait back in their den with tongues that already taste the food they expect, so we go forth, sheltered by black night, into the heart of our city to meet certain death. We gaze upon the Queen of Cities, now fallen. We step among the piles of lifeless bodies that litter the streets. Not all the corpses were Trojan, however. We who have been conquered summon enough strength and courage to take many of our Greek victors on man's long last journey. Most of my companions are killed. Pain is everywhere. Panic is everywhere. And death is everywhere. The clash of weapons draws us to Priam's palace, where a terrible battle rages. Ladders cling to the walls. Greek warriors clutch them with one hand and in the other hold a shield against the attack of arrows. Meanwhile, Trojans are on the roof, tearing down the towers and ripping up the roof, using whatever objects they can find as weapons for their final self-defense. We make our way to the roof to help the defenders. Below, other Trojans guard the doorways to the interior of the palace. From the roof, we see Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, leading a group of warriors to Priam and Hecuba's private rooms. As a snake fed on poisonous plants casts off its old skin and emerges from its hole with the warm days of spring, shining with the splendor of youth, and flicks its three-forked tongue from its mouth, so Neoptolemus shines in his father's lustrous bronze armor. Using his battle axe, he bursts through the doorway, tearing the bronze-plated doors from their hinges. Neoptolemus forces his way into the confusion with the strength of his father. Neither bolts nor guards can stop him. a foaming river that bursts its banks and overflows, its violent motion tearing away all barriers as it rushes furiously over the fields, sweeping herds and pens away, is more calm than this son of Achilles. I also see Hecuba with her 100 daughters and Priam. The old king has put his long-abandoned armor upon his aged shoulders, grabbed his useless sword, and is preparing to meet his death among the invading Greeks. Hecuba and her women have tried to take refuge among the household shrines. They press together there, clutching these statues of the gods, like doves driven forth by a black tempest. When Hecuba sees her husband in the armor of his youth, she asks him, "What madness moves you to put on your old armor? Where do you intend to go? Even if Hector were here, you could do nothing to save us. Come, join me. Either this sacred altar will protect us, or we shall die together." Then one of Priam's sons comes running towards his parents. Through enemies and arrows, he desperately tries to escape Neoptolemus' sword. Finally, Achilles' son spears him through the back, and the boy falls dead at the feet of his parents. Being face to face with death does not silence the old king's fury or his tongue. "May the gods reward you as you deserve for making a father view the murder of his son," he exclaims. "Achilles, the warrior you falsely claim as your father, treated his enemy Priam more respectfully than this." The old king hurls his spear at Neoptolemus, but his arm is so weak that the spear merely catches upon a bronze decoration on Achilles' great shield and hangs there harmlessly. Neoptolemus replies, "I shall send you to my father with a message. Tell him how poorly I fight and how shameful I am. Now die." He pulls the trembling old king toward the altar. When Priam slips in the pool of his dead son's blood, Neoptolemus grabs Priam's hair in his left hand and with his right hand plunges his flashing sword into the old king's side. So ends the life of one of the great kings of Asia. He was doomed to live long enough to see his sons murdered and his city in flames. His corpse now lives by the shore of the sea, a headless, nameless body. As I gaze upon the dead king, in my mind, I see my own father, my wife and son, and our plundered house. When the vision leaves me, I find that I am alone. The women have either leaped to the ground far below or have thrown themselves into the fire. Suddenly, in the light of the fires, I notice Helen quietly hiding by the shrine of Vesta. The hateful woman is at a loss. She knows the Trojans despise her for causing the destruction of Troy. On the other hand, she fears the vengeance of the Greeks and the anger of Menelaus, whom she abandoned. My heart blazes with resentment as I gaze at the source of all our woes, and I want to make her pay for all the death and destruction. For her sake, Troy has burned. For her sake, Trojan land is soaked with blood. For her sake, our good king has been murdered. Without thinking, I say aloud, "How will Helen pay for her crime? Will she sail back to Sparta without injury, a queen returning in triumph from a major victory? Will she have the pleasure of returning to her father's house and living among her family? There is no honor in killing a woman, yet it will bring me great satisfaction to avenge the ashes of my family." Suddenly, my mother appears before me in all her divine radiance. "My son," she says, "it is not Helen or Paris who is to blame. The gods have destroyed Troy. Now return home and see if your father, your wife, and your child are still alive. If my love of your family had not prevented it, Greek swords would have drunk their blood and flames would have consumed their bodies. My first thought when I return home is to carry my aged father to the safety of the hills. But he steadfastly refuses my pleas. You are young and strong enough to flee, he tells me. I shall take my own life and leave my possessions to the Greeks. I look at my father aghast. Do you expect me to flee and leave you here? I asked him. If the gods intend to burn our great city to the ground, and you firmly intend to remain here, then Neoptolemus, who is already bathed in Priam's blood, who murders the son in front of his father by a sacred shrine, that Neoptolemus will bring death here. Is this why you brought me home, mother? Did you save me from the sword and the fire so that I could watch the Greeks enter my house and murder my father, my wife, and my son? Never. I shall die fighting the Greeks and avenging our people. I have put on my sword and have my shield upon my arm when my wife holds up our little son and pleads with me. If you are leaving here to die, she says, then take us with you, for you are abandoning us to the Greeks. Otherwise, use your armor to defend your own home." And as my wife stands there weeping, a wondrous omen appears. Upon the head of our little son, Aeneas, flames that do not burn suddenly play upon his hair, illuminating his face with their ruddy glow. Frightened by the blaze, we quickly quench the holy fire with water. But my father joyously raises his eyes and his arms to the heavens and prays, "Jupiter, father of gods and men, if we deserve your favor, confirm this omen with some sign." He has hardly finished speaking when we hear a sudden crack of thunder and see a star shoot down from the heavens into the forest, leaving a trail of light in the evening sky. "Now I shall go with you, my son," Aeneas tells me, "wherever you lead us. Gods of my fathers," he prays, "save my house and my grandson. If you have sent this omen, then Troy must remain under your protection." By this time, I can hear the roaring flames are closer to us. "If we do not leave here quickly, we shall be engulfed in a flood of fire," I tell my family. I then spread a lion's skin over my shoulders and neck, stoop down and say, "Come, father, climb upon my shoulders and hold on to my neck. Carry with you the sacred objects and Troy's household gods. It is not right for me to carry them until I have washed off the blood of battle in a bubbling stream. Whatever happens, you and I shall endure it together. Little Aeneas, take my hand and try to keep up with me. Wife, follow us quickly." We pass through burning Troy, protected by the darkness. As we approach the gates, my father cries, "Run, my son! I see the bronze shields of the Greeks drawing near." Fearing for my father and my son, I head for the back streets and a more devious course, forgetting that my wife is behind us. So I lose her to Troy's shadows. I never know whether she stops or whether she tries to follow and loses us. I do not even think to look back for her until we reach the mound of sacred to Ceres, where we find our household servants. Then, of course, I'm frantic. I leave Aeneas and Aeneas in a hidden spot and run back home, trying to retrace my steps. I do not see my wife. The towering flames are devouring our house. In a mad frenzy, I rush among the city's ruins, calling her name again and again. Suddenly, the sad form of my wife appears before my eyes. As I stand speechless, the vision says, "Do not sorrow, dear husband. The Lord of high Olympus will not permit me to join you on your journey. Years of wandering are your fate, followed by kingship, a royal wife, and satisfaction in a rich land that surrounds the Tiber River. I shall never be a slave to some Greek woman, but shall stay here with Sibyl, the great mother of the gods. Love our child. Farewell." I stand there weeping with so much I want to say to her. 3 times I try to embrace her, but each time the vision escapes my grasp, drifting away like a light breeze. Finally, with the coming of dawn, I return to my family. To my surprise, a large number of Trojans have joined us and are prepared to follow me wherever I lead them. Since Greeks are guarding the city gates, we leave by back roads toward the mountains.